Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Theological Sidebars. Here we are today, going to be dealing with our passage from this past week. And we find ourselves in the book of Matthew chapter 10, looking at 32 and 33. Now, here's the interesting thing, right? You've probably read these a bunch of times, talking about acknowledging and denying Jesus. So what I want us to do is kind of dig deeper into that and say, what is that actually all about? What does that actually mean? So let's do this. Therefore, everyone who will acknowledge me before others, I will also acknowledge him before my Father in heaven. But whoever denies me before others, I will also deny him before my Father in heaven. Okay, look, if you've grown up in the church at all, you've read these things and you've thought, yeah, I know that. Got that. That's pretty good. But there's so much to unpack here. Here's the big thing that today I just want to deal with, okay? As we go through something like this, I want us to look at specifically this idea of acknowledging Jesus. Because when we think about these words, that's right, mirrors my camera, there we go. If we think about these words, right, to acknowledge, oftentimes we kind of read this passage and we kind of think this is an acknowledgement, and really what it is just you kind of believe it in your heart and you trust in that, and that's enough. I think a lot of the times, and if you've followed along, if you've been on the other episodes that we do of OTXNT on our podcast, you kind of see that we've been dealing with this topic of the worship service and the idea of an altar call. Coming up, we're going to be doing one on the sinner's prayer and the value of that. But one of the things that we kind of in church sometimes talk about is, okay, your acknowledgement, and we kind of deal with it as if it's a one-time thing, right? So I acknowledge Jesus, I've said the prayer, I've come down, and then we're good to go. But here's the deal, right? This is the piece that has gotten me, and this is the thing I want to keep looking at, is right here. The acknowledging of Jesus before others. Before others. Okay? Here's the deal. When he says this, you're going to acknowledge me. Everyone who acknowledges me before others, I will acknowledge him before my Father in heaven. What he's talking about is the relationship that we have with him now, how we acknowledge him now before other people is what matters. He's not saying that you just kind of hold it in and think about it. You know, this idea that you and I just kind of live out our faith in private and quietly, think through these things, but that our faith should be lived out before others. It's a public thing, is to be living out your faith. And so, so think about what comes with acknowledgement. So in acknowledgement, you're going to acknowledge who he is. In this passage alone, as a Christian, I think it's sufficient to say, I have to acknowledge the fact that he very well states, your existence is in his hands. Your eternity is in his hands, right? That's part of what I need to acknowledge as a Christian. So this is key, right? Because there are a lot of people that say, oh yeah, I'm cool with Jesus. Jesus is my Savior. But he's, for me, almost like this kind of mantra of the day of my truth, your truth. And I realize there's no such thing as my truth or your truth. There's only the truth, right? And so do I acknowledge that this is true, that Jesus holds eternity for everyone in his hands, that he is the one who it matters that he will acknowledge you. Why does it matter if he will acknowledge you? Well, look at the passage here, right? Because right before this, he says that he is in control, or the Father's in control of both the soul, just of the soul and the body, right? It says, don't fear those who kill the body, but are able to kill the soul. Rather, fear him who is able to destroy both the soul and the body in hell. So this is a key point, which is to say that Jesus is in control of vouching for you and I before the Father, who is the one who holds everything, your judgment, in place. And so part of this, I think we need to realize, is we can't just live a life that says, I'm a Christian, I keep these things to myself. You know, in America, we talk about, things that we don't talk about, politics and religion, right? That doesn't work with us. As Christians, you shouldn't have a private faith. Your faith should be public. It should be something that we try to talk to other people about. It should be things that we try to nudge the conversation towards God. It should be a burden that we feel to share this before others. And in this context as well, this is them going out and sharing with other people, recognizing that they will be, as he says in Matthew 10:17, those others, same word behind that, which is men, in this one and in that context there, are going to be the people that will throw them into prisons and flog them and things like that. And so recognizing that this is talking about that you live your faith out publicly, that everyone's eternity is in the hand of Jesus, but that as you go out, recognize that, as you live it before others, it may not be easy. And there might be people who will try to create problems for you as a result. And so this is something I think that we should kind of get back to, is that our faith is a very public thing, should be public. There should be things about us that people notice. I don't know about you, but I feel like, people kind of get weirded out by the idea of our faith being public. But think about this. I mean, if you walk down the street, even today, if you live in a big city like we do, you see people who are obviously of different faiths, dressing a certain way, looking a certain way, and what comes of that, right? I don't know if that doesn't really create issues. I mean, we eat in the same places. At least that's the nature of living in an American city right now. Now, granted, is there going to be problems for people sometimes like that? Sure. Certain places there might be discrimination or things that might happen as a result of looking a certain way or how your faith on display like that. But like, that doesn't really mean anything. But yet we don't even want people to know sometimes. We're nervous about putting a T-shirt on. Now, granted, look, some of those Christian T-shirts can be pretty dorky, and so maybe you don't want to put that one on. But there should be something public about us, and it doesn't need to be. And let me say this: I think your faith should be public, not in the same way that a WWJD bracelet is, or an NOTW sticker, right? It should be something much greater than that. It just needs to be your verbal witness. It needs to be you knowing people and acknowledging Jesus and sharing Jesus with others. And the private part of this, I would say, needs to happen within the body of the church, that the church needs to see you acknowledge him. So if you're a Christian and you don't have a church body, you are failing in this regard. If you're a Christian and you don't go to church, you have failed even in the simplest of ways to acknowledge him before others. Because when you take the Lord's Supper together, we are acknowledging him before each other. When you get baptized, if you're somebody who said you're a Christian and you have not gotten baptized, you have failed in this most basic way to acknowledge him. But once we do that and we acknowledge, however your church does it, for us, it's a monthly basis. We acknowledge him together as we take Lord's Supper. We do this. We acknowledge this as we worship together, as we sit and respond to the word. When we gather together, we say we have a reason to gather together. We acknowledge him. And what does that say, too? That he takes priority over our leisure and our weekend. Granted, are there more things you'd like to be doing on a Sunday? Sure. Right? Would you rather be at the lake? Would you rather go to Disneyland? Sure. And I don't think the church needs to be competing for the entertainment value, right? It's not about entertainment. It's not about a show. It's not about how good the preaching is. But I must say, you might find it in some places. But it comes back down to, I gather why? I gather to acknowledge him. To acknowledge who I am, who he is. And I think it's the most basic Christian piece as we do this as a body. But in the context, they're being sent out. They're acknowledging him before others. So, do we do that? Will you do that? Will you acknowledge him? And then the other kind of thing is you even read up in context, right? Let's go there. Read up in context, right? That in 22, talking about enduring, right? Could you endure if persecution? Are you ready to acknowledge if there were persecution? Could you do that, right? That's a big question you and I need to ask, right? Is, will I still follow and acknowledge him even if it meant that it would be difficult? All right, so I want you to think about that, chew on that a little bit. Make sure, do we acknowledge beyond simply I've acknowledged him in my heart? Have I acknowledged him to others? Do I share with others? Have I acknowledged him to the church? Do I acknowledge him with my weekly practice of showing up for church and being part of the body? Do I acknowledge him with my verbal witness with others? Do I acknowledge him with how I live my life? But before others is what he's saying. Do we do it? All right, take care. And hey, look for when we drop with the next OTX NT that should be coming out very soon, this Thursday on the Sinner's Prayer. Looking forward to hearing more with that with Dr. Marquez as we take that one on. All right, guys, take care. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.